This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders. Today I'm honored to have Topaz Adizes on the show. He is an Emmy Award winner, filmmaker, as well as the author of a book called 12 Questions for Love and the founder of The Skin Deep. He's also got some videos, The And, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Anyway, with all that being said, Topaz, welcome to the show.
John, good to be here. Let's do it. I'm ready to jump in.
Yeah,
let's do it.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background, how you got into conversations and questions and building relationships and connections.
Look, my parents got divorced when I was 4. You're a kid, you're seeing like these gods, your parents are gods at that age and they're fighting and you're just wondering what's going on. Why isn't this working? Where's the connection? And I think that kind of manifested in my teens with talking to people. And then I grabbed a camera and I went traveling after I graduated college and just kind of one-way ticket to Australia. It took me to Australia, to India, and ended up in Sweden. And the camera was my bridge, man. It was the door opener. It was a bridge into other people's worlds. It was a door opener to other people's homes. And I realized the camera had that power, and I was able to kind of connect and explore other people's worlds. And so for 20 years as a filmmaker, made films with the Sundance, Cannes, and traveled the world doing that. And then one day I decided to adjust what I was doing. Mm-hmm. The question I was asking myself before is how can I be a film director? To how can I inject ideas into the mainstream? And that seemed like a more interesting question to ask myself. How can I inject ideas in the mainstream? And with the advent of digital technology and the media and the internet media, it was that's a great way to do it. So 11 years ago, I launched an experience design studio called The Skin Deep, mm-hmm. which basically asks itself the question is, how is the emotional experience of being human changing in lieu of all this technology, right? When we launched in 2014, you were having dating apps coming out and all this technology was coming out. We were socializing differently, WhatsApp and all this, we're 10 years in on social media or even less. And now we have AI coming out.
Yeah.
Where you're not even going to know, you can make, soon we're going to have what Jaws was in terms of changing the first blockbuster. We're going to have the first blockbuster of some kid or some person in a room who's going to make an epic film on their own with them in AI.
Oh, yeah. We're really close. Yeah. 100%.
And so, with the shifts, we humans are so good at adapting to change that we so quickly just adapt and assume it's always been like this, but it hasn't, And so I created the Experience Design Studio because as things changed, it is even more important to ask yourself the questions about how conscientious you're being in lieu of those technological changes. These tools that come into our life that change the way we do things and we relate to things also change the way we relate to one another and ourselves. So the design studio was, let me create experiences that brings more consciousness to how we relate to each other and ourselves, such that we're more aware of how we're using the technological tools in our hands. And one of the most successful experiences we launched is called The And, which is about the space between, because relationship is you and I, us and them. It's the and that connects you. And so we basically brought, for the last 11 years, over 1,200 pairs into a room. They face each other. They're, brother and sister, parent and child, lovers, exes, best friends, and asking each other questions. And I show it to you at all times, I show you both the speaker and the listener. Because what I'm saying is it's not just who's speaking that's important. And it's not just the listener who's important, even though that's really important. It's both of them. It's the space between. It's the and. And so I'm coming to you from that space, from filmmaker, curiosity about people, then creating the and then literally witnessing over 1,200 pairs in cathartic conversation.
So you also have a wide shot that shows both of them at the same time. Is that not correct? Yeah.
So it's always a triptych or a butt panel, but it's never just a single shot. right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about like, when you first did this and the first time you had like two people conversing and you got to feel the emotion of like what was changing with them. Cause it's a changing experience, right? Nobody leaves there the same, and you can kind of tell just by watching the videos that they're going to be different when they finish this thing. So what did you feel the first time? Like, how did you know you were onto something?
I remember at the time, the editor who's cutting it, my first editor, his name was Chris at the time. Him and I, after we just, because I knew I was going to do a triptych. I was going to show all three shots or bipanel. And we just did an experiment. And I said, we got something here. We have something very special. I just knew it because I could see the facial reactions. I saw that you could get a sense beyond what was just verbally said, but a sense about the space. It was illuminating the space between. And I just knew, we just both knew. We looked at each other and said, well, we got something here. You could feel it because you had these conversations, you asked questions, and just how people's faces were reacting to one another even before they said words or in the pauses. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, and then it became a pattern of like, okay, how can I improve this experience for the people who are having it, who are sitting down and facing each other, who are courageous enough to ask the questions? How can I make this a better experience for them, a more cathartic experience for them? And that's what I've been focusing on for the last 11 years, really, is how can I construct better questions? How can I create a better space for this? So, and sorry, but just the last thing is like, that's what's in the book, right? The book is, we had Jill call me up, who I didn't know at the time, but she had been a fan of the Skinny for 4 or 5 years. And she just called me up in direct email and just said, been a fan for a long time. I'm wondering, as a fan, like, what have you seen really works? And why does it work? And so the learning of what I've had, my team and I've studying just human behavior in that setting is what's distilled in the book. It's how to have better conversations, to have cathartic relationships, deeper relationships. And it just comes down to create the space and construct and have well-constructed questions.
So the questions, that seems to be like the evolving thing. You're getting better, but how did you land on like, what are the questions that trigger that deep emotional connection?
Just, what is it called? Trial and test and trial?
Yeah, trial and error. Yeah.
Trial and error. Just that. Is okay, people coming in, they fill out a questionnaire, I'd read it. Through what they both wrote separately, because they don't know what the other person wrote, can get a sense of, okay, where is there room for growth here? Where is there the conflict here that there's room for greater clarity? Where's the opportunity here for them to connect deeper? Okay, great. There's this, there's that. Here are the spots that they tiptoe around. Here's the spots they don't talk around. Here's the spot they don't have resolved. Here's the thing that they're hesitant to share. Great. How can I create the space? That's pretty clear. That applies to everyone. But then how do I construct the questions and in what sequence so that I can bring them into that place and offer them the opportunity to talk about it? Not force them to talk about it, just offer them. Like, that's one of the things about well-constructed questions. One of the things is offer them as gifts, not as like, hey, answer this question, right? Because it's much easier to shake an open hand than a finger that's pointing at you. And you can feel that in the tone of the question and the shape of the question. And so you create open-ended questions that offers them the chance. Can you see me? Yeah. That offers them the chance to, hold on a sec. Sorry. There we go. It offers them the chance to respond or not.
Right.
And yeah.
So when you're constructing like a question that, a lot of times questions can be intense, and people, me specifically, when someone's asking me like a personal question, I don't always want to answer, right? I want to hide in. So how do you change that question to make it be like a gift and not like an interrogation?
Well, here, great. But before even the question, you got to create the space.
Okay.
Because John, you're not sleeping in the kitchen and you're not cooking in the bedroom. You go to the kitchen to cook and you go to the bed to sleep.
All right.
You know what you're doing in each space. So when someone comes at you with an intense question, you're like, where the hell is this coming from? Why is it? Where is it? If your partner comes home and goes, John, why do you love me so much? You're not wondering why you love her or them. You're wondering, Where's this question coming from?
Yeah. Where's it going?
Where's it going? What's the tip, right? So the first thing we need to do is create the space so that people know why we're asking these questions. We know where this is from. You don't want to answer intense personal questions if the space is not built for it. But I bet, John, if you go to certain spaces, maybe it's a therapy session, maybe you've just had a big fight with your partner and they're resolving it. That might be a time where you're like, okay, this is a space where I understand where these questions are coming from, and it is a space for me to answer them. So before we even construct the questions, we got to create the space. And the space is, you got to create the boundaries, and you got to articulate the intention. And the intention is different than the agenda. And I know people hear agenda, the term at work, it's like, oh, what's the agenda for the meeting? We hit these, we go to this point, then this point, then this point. He's like showing you the roadmap. I'm talking about the agenda behind the roadmap. Like, I want to get to this decision. I want everyone to say my strategy is the right strategy. Like when you go to a meeting and you could feel, or when your partner, and you could feel like they want you to apologize to them. They want you to say that they're right. They want you to agree with them because, right? You can feel that you're not really engaging with them. You're really engaging with your mind, which is there to protect you. And you're kind of playing politics. You're like, where's this coming from? Where's the boss? The boss asks a question. What answer do they want to hear? Because why would they ask that question? You're not really thinking about the question. So how do you create a space where people can really think about the question? You got to tell them where you're starting from. Hey, love, I want I want to have a date night where we're just going to ask each other questions. Okay. So if your partner tells you that, then when they come and say, why do you love me? You're not wondering why you're asking you that. You know why they're asking you that, because you guys created the space. So we're going to do a date night. We're going to each ask each other intimate questions.
Should both partners come up with questions in advance, or like how do you start that up?
I mean, look, there's a huge dynamic to who's asking the question. Like you go to couples therapy or in the room with the boss, and the one who asked the question has the power. And this is something that we overlook all the time.
Right.
We overlook. You're there with your partner having a disagreement. One of you asked the question, and now you're both talking about that question. Whoever asked the question has a lot of power, because that's where you're both focusing your energy on. So that should be acknowledged. When the boss says, hey, here, even for a warm-up or like a wrap-up of the week, and they ask a question, the team kind of wants to know, why is that the question they're asking?
Yeah, 100%.
And on the flip side is like, maybe they're just asking a shitty question. So why are we spending the whole team here is 12 people on the unit, and we're spending 12 of us answering basically a stupid question?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where's the value in this question? Right? So what helps is when you articulate the intention, then the questions can either line up with that and say, like, my intention is to explore a relationship. I don't really know where it's going to go. I'm feeling like it's challenged. I'm feeling really excited about it. I want to be grateful, whatever it is. And let's just play a game where like ask a question, then you ask a question. Okay. Or what's really nice is the randomness. Like we have 15 editions of physical card games. And what's beautiful there is you open up a box and you pull out a random question. And then it's like, then the power is more equal because neither of you are choosing the question. You're being served a question, and the question is being served randomly. And that's nice. That's also good in the workplace. So you're coming to warm up a meeting, for instance. Mm-hmm. Instead of you saying, hey, I want to ask this question, what you learned this week? And everyone's, okay, that is a great question. Or, what's our missed opportunity in the business? And everyone's wondering, what do you want to hear, right? Or what do I really want to say? If you pull out a question randomly for a box, right, then you didn't use your power dynamic to choose the question.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good because we all kind of have this like thought in our head when someone asks us a question, what's the motive behind it? And even if it is like an icebreaker question, you kind of like, you don't want to, oh, what'd you do this weekend? Do you want to hear that I checked email and worked? Yeah, so like when you ask that frequency, icebreaker type question, and someone says something like, "What'd you do this weekend?" They want to know, like, do you want to know what I did this weekend, or do you want like me to, tell you that I checked email, that I came into the office, or that I actually went and had fun and did not think about work at all? Like, well, where's this coming from? Who knows? So I think random is really good.
Random helps, and then also the thing is, look, if you're going to ask your team a warm-up question, try to ask something that actually gets us into it. that really acknowledges the time. So you can, because look, and the way to do that is to ask a connective question. That's one of the qualities of a well-constructed question, is a connective question. And what does a connective question mean? It means that it acknowledges the connection. So if I ask you, John, what do you love about work? Right? And 3 other people, I say, hey, John, what do you love about work? And they're all different. Your answer is going to be the same. Hey, what do you love about work? Whatever it is. Yeah. But if I instead make it a connective question that acknowledges the person you're speaking with and that you're in your conversation with, they say, hey, John, what do you think we both love about work? What do you think you love about work that I hate about work? Do you see how those 2 questions, whoever asks you that question is going to be a different answer?
Yeah, 100%.
Because it acknowledges the people who are in conversation. It acknowledges our relationship. It acknowledges your impression of me, right?
Yeah, it changes my concept. Instead of thinking about work, now I'm thinking about you.
Yes, and our relationship together to work.
Yeah.
Do you see how that makes like that conversation less scripted, less generic, where everyone shuts off? And also, like, if you ask me that question or I ask you that question, we're both really interested in the answer because I'm wondering how the impression I make on you.
Yeah, you're wondering how I perceive you in relationship to work. And but also it changes. It makes me have to be more genuine about my answer because I know I can't just tell you what I want you to hear because you have a internal perception of this, of how this is going to go, and and I've got to tell you the truth, and not just what you want to hear.
Right, or like everyone has their bullshit detector, and they can tell if you're just bullshitting or not, and so that's where it starts to pull at the threads of our connection. And that's where we start to start the experience of empathy, of deeper sense of connection. Why? Because by my expression of whatever that answer is, or you to me, what we're doing is we're starting to express how we see each other. And ultimately, I think everyone wants to be seen.
Yeah, 100%.
In my opinion. Like when people say love, like part of what I think, love, what does that really mean? And da-da-da. But like part of that is like a sense of being seen. Like you have an argument with your best friend or your partner or a coworker. Mm-hmm. And if you do it in a way where like, okay, we don't have to agree, but we both respectfully disagree and we kind of see each other, your connection, your trust, or your relationship to them deepens only because you're like, okay, I see them and they see me. And I think that's a great way to deepen relationships. Is to have a practice where you're actually seeing each other. But then how do we set that up? We got to ask questions that set up answers that enable us to see each other.
Yeah, I think that, and what's, so I've been on this kick about reading about communication and trying to improve my communication just because, I don't know, I struggle sometimes with expressing things, properly. And one of the things that I'm starting to realize is that a lot of, what we need to communicate has to come out with questions. And it's like you have to know how to ask a question in a way that's not going to push the person away. But also you don't want to lead them in the direction that makes it not genuine. So the connected questions is kind of the first time I've heard someone kind of put that into a way that makes sense to me. Of how to bring both people together when you're asking a question and not really push them apart. So a lot of times asking questions when you're trying to have this deep conversation, you're asking someone an intimate question and it's just going to like push them away because you're like, whoa, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I want to share this just yet.
All right, so that's part of the thing about creating a safe space. Mm-hmm. And so number one, so here's like a bunch to take on. Like number one, create a safe space. Great. Well, the first thing about a safe space is don't confuse it with comfort. You could be in an uncomfortable space, albeit safe. When I go bungee jumping, in theory, I should be safe because these guys have tested the bungee cord thousands of times. They've done this thousands of times. I'm safe. But when I jump, I'm definitely uncomfortable. When you have conversations, don't confound safety. So you want a safe space and it's okay to be uncomfortable. That's actually a great place because that's where you're exploring. Now, how do you make it safe though? You got to have boundaries. You got to know.
Yeah.
You have to have boundaries and you have to know the intention of what the space is about. So if you articulate, this is where I'm starting from. I don't have an agenda for where we're going to end up. I'm not forcing us to get to point C or whatever that means for you to apologize to me. No, because if someone feels that you're trying to get somewhere that you don't necessarily want to go, you're going to protect yourself with your brain. You're going to be playing politics. You're going to respond in a way that's defensive and such. But if they say, listen, this is where I'm starting from, I don't know where we'll end up. Why? Because this is going to be a journey we both walk on together in this conversation. Okay, that's an invitation to come out. The other thing is part of the boundaries is saying like, look, you don't have to answer the question.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer the question. And like when we do both the card games or like in production, and when people say, we tell them like, listen, you have to read every question, but you don't have to answer anything you don't want. You're in the right to pass by looking the other person in the eye for 10 seconds or just taking a pause and saying pass. This way, people don't feel forced against the wall. When you get someone against the wall, they're going to protect themselves with their head. When you say like, look, you can step forward and dance with the response or not, you could do that with their heart. The heart being like exploring and being. And then also, so that's something to be said, like when you invite people into this space to have a conversation, one of the boundaries is like, hey, you don't have to answer any question you don't want, but we are going to ask the questions. Because what I've seen from 10, 11 years now of doing this, 10 countries, over 1,200 pairs, is that like what's really important is not the answer. It's the ability to sit in the discomfort of the questions. Because I promise you're sitting there with somebody, coworkers or your partner or best friend, and there's an uncomfortable question that comes up, even if you don't verbally answer it, you both are answering it in your heads. You're answering your own version in your head, and then maybe later on, you'll actually articulate what you think the answers are and discuss it. But it's okay to just practice the art of sitting in the discomfort. Like that's a skill set, that's a muscle that's important because that enables us to sit in discomfort and spend more time exploring the spaces where we're uncomfortable instead of racing to answers that make us comfortable, but might be the right answers to the wrong question or the wrong answers to the right question.
So when it comes to like discomfort in questions, because I've had this conversation, several times in the past about about needing to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Like you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I tell my kids that all the time. But what does that mean in like an intimate setting? Like when you're one-on-one talking to someone, how do you know when's too far? How do you know when's not enough? Like how do you know where that like that feeling is? And how does that relate to like, how is that different when you're at work versus when you're in your
Wow. Great. Okay. Wow. Great. This is great. So the first thing that comes up for me is when people say like be comfortable and being uncomfortable, like that doesn't make sense. Like what are we talking about here? If I'm comfortable about uncomfortable, then I'm comfortable. So it's not that. It's not to me like big comfort. Like I know
it's getting used to being uncomfortable. How about that?
Yeah, but I say it's like being graceful.
Great. Okay.
Well, you're one to the other. It's like, look, this is tough, but I'm not going to beat myself up and I'm not going to beat you up, but it's going to be tough and I'm just going to breathe in it. And I'm going to be graceful in the discomfort. So that's what comes up for me. Like distinctions are important. And if we're trying to be comfortable and uncomfort, then we're like a little confused because we're trying to like have that feeling of comfort, which is different. Yet we're trying to be uncomfortable. It's like, wait, but it's like two magnets pulling in different directions. It doesn't make. So for me, it's like being grateful.
Yeah.
Second, you say like, how do you know the feeling when you're too far or not? I don't know. Like straight up, I don't know. That's something that like, I don't know. And I'm not going to pretend to tell you like, this is when you know. What I do think is it's a practice, man. It's a practice of your own ability to like read the room, read the person you're speaking to, but also it's a practice of your relationship. Like when someone says something to you that might be a little hurtful, like, can you sit with it? Can you let them know? Yeah, thanks for saying that, but that hurt me a little bit. I'm noticing and I'm feeling things. Which leads to the thing about a distinction that's important to notice about vulnerability. Like you hear a lot of things people saying, like, when people say like be vulnerable or share vulnerable, they tell leaders like, open the day with like something vulnerable about you and you tell the story about how you are vulnerable. Okay, cool. Yes, it's vulnerable to share and open yourself up. But let's also acknowledge that it's also vulnerable to hold a space and listen when someone else is being vulnerable. All right? Your wife tells you, your partner tells you about how it hurts their feelings when you do this or that, and how they feel like whatever. Your colleague at work tells you, you know what, it's really hard for me when you do this and that, cut me off. I don't feel respected and heard, and it makes me feel whatever, unseen, and like it's hard for me to work with you, blah, blah. That's vulnerable of them to share with you.
Yeah.
But it's also vulnerable of you to sit there and take it instead of cutting them off, either gaslighting them or trying to solve it immediately. Let's just also acknowledge that there's also vulnerability in the listening.
Yeah, I think it's really good because I've had this, problem of trying to solve, people's, problems. Like they want to come tell me about something. And I feel like whenever they're telling me, about this issue or whatever's going on, that I need to solve it. And one of the things, so I mentioned this before we started talking on the podcast, that I read this book called Super Communicators by Charles Duhigg. He wrote another book called Power of Habit. That was a really good one. But in that, he talked about how, like, you need to, almost what you're saying when it comes to the boundaries and intentions. He's saying you have to figure out if the conversation is about fixing or, what was it? Fixing or hugging or whatever. I forget what it was.
Uh-huh.
But basically, like, do you want to like have someone just to be there and, relate to you, or to try to fix the problem? And I've actually got to the point where now I have to ask, do you want me to fix this or listen? Because I don't know.
So let's talk. Your last question there was like, how does it relate to work? So let's take what you just talked about now. Like with my team, and I told you, like, look, you don't sleep in the kitchen and you don't cook in the bedroom. So when you're having a meeting, what kind of meeting is this? Right? Is this like in a relationship? Is this a fix it conversation, or is this like a empathy conversation where I listen and hold space for you? It's good to know what kind of conversation it is, so you could play that role. So you know what permissible actions are. Sleeping in the kitchen is not permissible. Cooking in the kitchen is. So in the workplace, what kind of meeting is this? So then I know what the boundaries are. I know what's permissible. I know what to expect of the meeting, and I know what the meeting is expecting of me. That's essential. So is this a brainstorming meeting? Brainstorming meeting is a totally different meeting than like a data analysis meeting where we're analyzing, collecting information. Sometimes you're a leader of a team. You call a meeting, and all you're doing is collecting information because you're trying to figure something out for yourself. So you're just asking a bunch of people questions. Boom, 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 boom. At the end of the meeting, they're like upset because you're not asking them for their ideas. Contrary to, like, say you do a brainstorming meeting, and you're just, yes and da da da. At the end of the meeting, you thank you very much, and then you get a call from one or two of your people like, man, why are we having these meetings where we just talk about ideas and nothing's decided? What a waste of time. Like, no, hold on. There's a brainstorming meeting where we're like, yes and your bad idea could be the thing that sparks the next good idea, that then sparks another great idea. So there's no bad ideas and everything's yes, and we don't have to get to a conclusion. All right? So don't be upset we don't get a conclusion. This is a data analysis meeting where we're analyzing information. Don't be upset that I'm not asking about your opinion or about ideas. That's not what this meeting is about. This other meeting is about execution. I want to know who's doing what by when and how. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm not interested in ideas. This is a decision-making meeting where we are deciding. At the end of this meeting, we're deciding. So sometimes we have to cut through, and like at some point, I have to make a decision, and we're going to make a very clear line between discussing ideas, moving forward, and saying that's what we're going to do. So when people know what's expected of them, and what expected of them, and what does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
You with me?
Yeah, I think when it comes to,
So but like,
I was gonna say expectations in general. I think that's one of the things that a lot of leaders forget about. We forget to share expectations at the beginning. And, I get so many meeting invites that don't have an agenda on it, that don't even have a proper subject. And then I show up like not knowing what to expect. You're right. And I just think that's a big part of,
but expectations is like is a challenging word, because it's like expectations has some thought. Yeah. Maybe it's nuanced semantics, but for me, it's about creating a safe space that has boundaries and expectations of the behavior of what's permissible in that space and what's expected of you and what you expect of the space. So that's how I use the term expectations there. It's like,
Yeah, I get that.
what does success look like in this room? In this meeting, it's that we have great ideas. We're not deciding. What does success look like in this room? That we've made a decision. Might not be the best decision that I think, but we made a decision. We're executing it.
Mhm.
Right? So, and like in my business, right? For our team, we do have a rule, and it's called venting. And sometimes someone has had a shitty day, or they've had a real hard time trying to figure this out, or working in customer service, who knows what. And they go into like kind of this complain mode. They're venting. They're letting it out. And we say, hey, are you venting? Because we don't want to spend all our time complaining.
Yeah.
But we're humans. We're not robots. Like sometimes you got to let that emotion out, and we got to let that vent out. So, and you can't really move on until you vent it out. So we say, are you venting? You're like, oh yeah, I am venting. And then we all know in our team, in our culture, you got 2 minutes, let that stuff out. And everyone knows they're venting. Let that heat out. When they're done, 2 minutes are done. We're like, all right, now we're talking about solving the problem. We're no longer venting and complaining.
Yeah, we're past.
We're past that. And also for the team, like sometimes if I come to the meeting and I know I'm about to vent because I need to let off steam, hey guys, I am venting. So they know I got 2 minutes. I know I got 2 minutes. And they know I'm just letting off steam. They don't have to respond. They just hold in the space when you let off steam, and then we'll talk about a solution or what to do. Right? But it's acknowledging the spaces we're in and giving names to them so that we know what's permissible and not, what's expected or not, so that we can constructively, coherently, meaning all of us together in an integrated manner, move forward.
Yeah, and I think venting is really good because it also shows vulnerability. It shows that you're being genuine with your feelings and like letting it out, like letting people know this is exactly what I feel right now, and I'm just gonna get it out there, whether it's productive or not. We're gonna get it out there, and then we can focus on being productive in 2 minutes.
Yeah, and also like, look, the workplace is not here for therapy.
Yeah,
right. We're not here. We're not your therapist. We're not qualified. That's not what this business is about. Right. That's not a function of a business organization is about. Right. For that, to support, you go to therapy or go to a group or some support group or right or one-on-one. But we're human. Right. Emotions does get in the way. We need to find a way of constructively allowing emotions to come up and constructively placed in a way that doesn't slow us down from working together as a team.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
So let me ask you this: through your 1,200 pairs of conversations that you've filmed and taking part in, when it comes into your book, 12 Questions for Love, did you narrow it down to 12 actual questions?
Yeah, I did.
Yes,
I had. At least it was like the idea was, Topaz, why does this work so well? Like and if anybody's listening, go to the Skin Deep on the YouTube channel, the Skin Deep. Watch any of the videos, and I promise 90% of you are going to fall into a rabbit hole of videos. Where you're going to see yourself, you're going to see other things, you're like, oh my God, is this real? Are these actors, what is going on here? No, there's over 1,200 pairs of people in different kinds of relationships having real conversations. And I think, yeah, I mean, what was the question?
So how'd you narrow it down to 12 questions? Yeah.
Sorry. So she goes, what works about it? And it's and what's in the book is how is the construction of how it works, is creating the space, go after certain questions. And the 12 questions I chose are the ones that are the meat and potatoes that basically are guaranteed to give you an incredible conversation that I've seen just work time and time again. But more importantly than the specific questions is why those questions work, and like other versions of those questions, so that you can have that conversation over and over and over again, right? And that you have the skill set of how to hold the space and how to ask well-constructed questions. And yeah, those are the 12 like most successful questions that are like my poker playing ones that work the best. But now, to be honest, I have so many new questions because at this point we're 11 years in. We're starting our 12th year now in 2025. It's the beginning of our 12th year. And now, man, when we do productions, people fly in from across the country. We have one coming up in January. One woman's flying in from London to LA for it. I mean, we don't pay anybody, all right? At this point, we have super fans who have played the game, have watched tons of videos. I mean, I can't ask the same questions. They're like well prepped. They've seen that question, what's the pain in me you wish you could heal and why? They've seen that answered 300 times already. right? They've answered themselves playing the card game. So I'm always developing new questions, right? And that's always super cool. So the 12 questions that are in the book, what's important is, look, I promise you have that conversation with your partner, you will have an incredible conversation, cathartic conversation. It'll be amazing. No, hands down, because I've seen it happen. It's like, once you see it happen so many times, it's no longer a magic trick. It just is. It's like gravity. It just works. But what's important in the book is now you know how to, what makes those questions work and what makes that space work. So you can apply yourself in whatever realm, whether it's work, friendships, intimate relationships, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just so you know, I've got that book next to my Audible queue for coming up. So I'm gonna be
Really?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be like, I didn't have I wanted to get it before this interview, but I did not quite get a chance to finish up my previous book. And I'm not one of those people that puts the bounce back and forth. I have to go sequentially, or I just lose it.
Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. Let me know if let me know if I'm wrong. Let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to dive into that. And I have watched some of the videos at Skin Deep YouTube channel, and they're awesome. I'm linking that in the show notes too at geekleader.com, so people can go there and click through. How else can people connect with you online if they want to find out more that you're working with? Pick up a copy of your game. We didn't even talk about the game, but you have a game too. The cards that you can get. How can people get that and learn more about asking questions and having these great conversations?
So we have 15 editions of these physical card games, which are awesome. We got self, coworkers, team building, couples, long-term couples, amusing, healing, friends, family, kids to play with your kids. All at theskindeep.com or go to Amazon. The book too, it's skindeep.com or Amazon or wherever you get your audiobook or ebook. That's it. Social media, it's the Skin Deep. I have my own personal website, but I just direct everyone to Skin Deep because that's where my team and I, that's where we put out all our products and our games and our digital workshops and all that.
Awesome. Topaz, this has been great. I really enjoyed the conversation. I feel like I'm learning a lot about communication, and I think that I'm going to be a better communicator going forward because of this, and hopefully all my listeners are too. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, John. Thank you so much.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to, click on their links, and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.